President Cyril Ramaphosa has bemoaned state capture incompetence and a lack of maintenance of locomotives at Transnet as part of the problems plaguing the state-owned entity. Ramaphosa visited the Richards Bay port terminal on the KwaZulu-Natal north coast following Transnet's decision to suspend the receiving of cargo via road. This followed threats by the uMhlathuze Municipality to take government and the entity to court, citing infrastructural and financial damage to its roadwork. So high volumes of trucks rolled into the port, causing congestion on the roads and raising safety concerns. But to take this discussion further, we're going to be joined via video link by Mike Walwyn, Director at the SA Association of Freight Forwarders. Mike, good afternoon and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, Liesl. Thanks for having me.
Mike, at this point, for those who've just tuned in, perhaps you could just give us an update on the situation in Richards Bay as we speak.
Yeah, sure. We still have a fairly catastrophic situation there, with those queues of trucks on the N2, and the refusal to allow them into the port, of course, doesn't help. Now, the root cause of that is the really dysfunctional rail connection between the coal fields and the port. The port on the western side, or the northern side, if you like, which is where Transnet operates, doesn't have the capacity to handle that many trucks. And the coal terminal itself, which is really a state-of-the-art and modern facility, and it works very well, can only accept coal by rail. So last year, for example, 20 million tons of coal was not exported at a time when world coal prices were at an all-time high. So it really is about the rail line. Now, I know that it hasn't been easy for Transnet Freight Rail because of things like cable theft and other interruptions on the line. But this has been building for a long time, and that is the root cause of the problem in Richards Bay.
Mike, thank you for that context. At this point, talk to the impasse and how it's affected your operations and international trade, given that this is one of the biggest ports in Africa.
Yeah, well, before I get into that, just remember that we have, I suppose I could say, 5 major international ports, 6 if you count Saldanha. The others are container ports largely, and they're all impacted by the same sort of problems. The railway lines and the lack of suitable equipment or bad maintenance of some of the equipment in the ports themselves, so that their productivity rates have been reduced by 50%. And that can't be good. We can't handle cargo at the rate we should be, which means that the shipping lines, the carriers, are tending to bypass, and a lot of them have now said they are going to go and deal with our cargo in Mauritius and feed it back in or out on smaller vessels. That will add to the transit times and the cost. So it's not a pretty situation. We've seen some encouraging signs from Transnet recently. We're very hopeful that Michelle Phillips, who we have a high regard for as acting CEO, will be able to make some difference. But because of the long lead times in ordering and buying the equipment we need, this is not going to be a quick fix. And the earliest of some upward improvement would be about March, but that won't be a complete fix either. There are lead times of probably 6 to 9 months on the major pieces of equipment we need, so that's the kind of time frame we're looking at.
Mike, there were some valid points raised by government in terms of Transnet, in terms of the infrastructural and financial damage to its road network. And at this point, you know, as we look from your vantage point, how should this matter be dealt with?
Right, well, that's a very good point, because it's fairly easy to analyze the damage, and government has done quite a good job of that. But fixing it, of course, is another thing. In our view, the only answer, and it really is that urgent now, because that's the lifeblood of the economy. Nothing that you or I do is not impacted by the logistics chain. It really has to be fixed. I think, in our view, it's a worse problem, if you will, than Eskom. So what is the answer? We think that the only answer lies in public-private partnerships. Now, I'm not advocating privatization, but I'm looking at situations like we have in our neighbor, in Maputo, where there is a partnership with a major international private operator, where the government of Mozambique holds 51% and the operator 49%, and the operator has operational independence. That's a fairly common model around the world, and we see it being expanded all the time. So for us, that's the only real answer. We don't believe that government or Transnet, within their own resources, has the capacity to fix this.
Given the public-private partnerships that you're advocating for, I want to bring the role and impact of the National Logistics Crisis Committee following business sector's appeal. Their role to date, how would you weigh in on the efficacy at this point? What also needs to be done on that front?
Oh, I certainly think so. I mean, we as an association were quite involved with the setting up of the NLCC, and more recently with the roadmap, which has been now produced. And all of that is very good at analysing, but hasn't turned into any concrete action. And if you want to go back to Richards Bay, there's a very good example there. The problem's been known for a long time, the railway line. We all know that. But I haven't yet seen any plan or timeline about what's going to be done to fix it. And that's where we need some more urgent input, and government, for whatever reason, doesn't have the capacity to provide that.
Do you suspect any form of sabotage, just as we wrap up this conversation?
I don't know. I mean, there are always conspiracy theories. Sabotage, yes, because cable theft on the rail lines is a reality and it's been happening for a long time. And that has certainly impacted on TFR's ability to deliver. So that's sabotage of a different kind. That's economic sabotage. I don't know of any other motives for any sabotage in the logistics chain.
All right, Mike, let's leave that conversation there. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.